Sideways Stories from Wayside School, Chapter 5, Todd. All of the children in Mrs. Jewell's class, except Todd, were talking and carrying on. Todd was thinking. Todd always thought before he spoke. When he got an idea, his eyes lit up. Todd finished thinking and began to speak, but before he said 2 words, Mrs. Jewell called him. Todd, you know better than to talk in class. You must learn to work quietly, like the other children. She wrote his name on the blackboard under the word discipline. Todd looked around in amazement. All of the other children, who had been talking and screaming and fighting only seconds earlier, were quietly working in their workbooks. Todd scratched his head. A child was given 3 chances in Mrs. Jewell's class. The first time he did something wrong, Mrs. Jewell wrote his name on the blackboard under the word discipline. The second time he did something wrong, she put a check next to his name. And the third time he did something wrong, she circled his name. Todd reached into his desk and pulled out his workbook. He had only just started working on it when he felt someone tap him on the shoulder. It was Joy. What page are you on? Joy asked. Page 4, Todd whispered. I'm on page 11. Todd didn't say anything. He didn't want to get into trouble, so he just went back to work. 5 minutes later, Joy tapped him again. Todd ignored her, so Joy poked him in the back with her pencil. Todd pretended he didn't notice. Joy got up from her seat and sharpened her pencil. When she came back, she poked it in Todd's back. What page are you on? Page 5, Todd answered. Boy, are you slow. I'm on page 29. It isn't a race, Todd whispered. 5 minutes later, Joy pulled Todd's hair and didn't let go until he turned around. What page are you on? She demanded. Page 6, Todd answered as quietly as he could. I'm on page 200, Joy shouted. Todd was very angry. Will you please let me do my work and stop bothering me? Mrs. Jewell heard him. Todd, what did I say about talking in class? Todd scratched his head. Mrs. Jewell put a check next to Todd's name on the blackboard under the word discipline. Todd tried really hard to be good. He knew that if he talked one more time, Mrs. Jewell would circle his name, and then he'd have to go home early at 12 o'clock on the kindergarten bus, just as he had the day before and the day before that. In fact, there hadn't been a day since Mrs. Jewell took over the class that she didn't send Todd home early. She said she did it for his own good. The other children went home at 2 o'clock. Todd wasn't really bad. He just always got caught. He really wanted to stay past 12 o'clock. He wanted to find out what the class did from 12 to 2, but it didn't look as though this was going to be his day. It was only 10:30, and he already had 2 strikes against him. He sealed his lips and went to work. There was a knock at the door. Mrs. Jewell opened it. 2 men stepped in wearing masks. Give us all your money, they demanded. All I have is a nickel, said Mrs. Jewell. I have a dime, said Mauricia. I have 13 cents, said Leslie. I have 4 cents, said Damien. What kind of bank is this? Said one of the robbers. It's not a bank, it's a school. Can't you read? No, said the robbers. Neither can I. Do you mean we walked up all the way up 30 flights of stairs for nothing? Don't you have anything valuable? Todd's eyes lit up. We sure do. We have knowledge. He grabbed Joy's workbook and gave it to the robbers. Knowledge is much more valuable than money. Thanks, kid, said one of the robbers. Maybe I'll give up being a criminal and become a scientist, said the other. They left the room without hurting anybody. Now I don't have a workbook, Joy complained. Mrs. Jewell gave her a new one. Joy had to start all the way back at the beginning. Hey, Joy, what page are you on? Asked Todd. Page 1, Joy sighed. I'm on page 8, Todd laughed triumphantly. Mrs. Jewell heard him. She circled his name. Todd had 3 strikes against him. At 12 o'clock, he left the room to go home early on the kindergarten bus. But this time when he left, he was like a star baseball player leaving the field. All the children stood up, clapped their hands, and whistled. Todd scratched his head. Chapter 6, BB. BB was a girl with short brown hair, a little BB nose, and totally tiny toes, and big brown eyes. Her full name was BB Gunn. She was the fastest drawer in Mrs. Jewell's class. She could draw a cat in less than 45 seconds, a dog in less than 30, and a flower in less than 8 seconds. But of course, BB never drew just one dog or one cat or one flower. Art was from 12:30 to 1:30. Why, in that time, she could draw 50 cats, 100 flowers, 20 dogs, several eggs, or watermelons. It took her the same amount of time to draw a watermelon as an egg. Calvin sat next to BB. He didn't think he was very good at art. Why, it took him the whole period just to draw one airplane. So instead, he just helped BB. He was Beebe's assistant. As soon as Beebe would finish one masterpiece, Calvin would take it from her and set down a clean sheet of paper. Whenever her crayon ran low, Calvin was ready with a new crayon. That way Beebe didn't have to waste any time. And in return, Beebe would draw 5 or 6 airplanes for Calvin. It was 12:30, time for art. Beebe was ready. On her desk was a sheet of yellow construction paper. In her hand was a green crayon. Calvin was ready. He held a stack of paper and a box of crayons. "Ready, Beebe?" said Calvin. "Ready, Calvin," said Beebe. "Okay," said Mrs. Jules, "time for art." She had hardly finished her sentence when Beebe had already drawn a picture of a leaf. Calvin took it from her and put another piece down. "Red," called Beebe. Calvin handed Beebe a red crayon. "Blue," called Beebe. He gave her a blue crayon. They were quite a pair. Their teamwork was remarkable. Beebe drew pictures as fast as Calvin could pick up the old paper and set down anew. A fish, an apple, 3 cherries, bing, bing, bing. At 1:30, Mrs. Jules announced, "Okay, class, art is over." Beebe dropped her crayon and fell over on her desk. Calvin sighed and leaned back in his chair. He could hardly move. They had broken their old record. Beebe had drawn 378 pictures. They lay in a pile on Calvin's desk. Mrs. Jules walked by. "Calvin, did you draw all these pictures?" "No, I can't draw. Beebe drew them all." "Well then, what did you draw?" asked Mrs. Jules. "I didn't draw anything." "Why not? Don't you like art?" "I love art. That's why I didn't draw anything." Mrs. Jules did not understand. "It would have taken me the whole period just to draw one picture, and Beebe would have only been able to draw 100 pictures, but with the 2 of us working together, she was able to draw 378 pictures. That's a lot more art." Beebe and Calvin shook hands. "No, that isn't how you measure art. Art isn't how many pictures you have, but how good the pictures are. Why, a person could spend his whole life just drawing one picture of a cat. In that time, I'm sure Beebe could draw 1,000,000 cats." 2,000,000, said Beebe. "But if that one picture is better than each of Beebe's 2,000,000, then that person has produced more art than Beebe." Beebe looked as though she was going to cry. She picked up all the pictures from Calvin's desk and threw them in the garbage, and then she ran from the room. "I thought her pictures were good," said Calvin. He reached into the garbage pail and took out a crumpled up picture of an airplane. Beebe walked outside to the playground. Lewis, the yard teacher, spotted her. "Where are you going?" "I'm going home to draw a picture of a cat." "Will you bring it to school and show it to me by tomorrow morning?" "Tomorrow?" laughed Beebe. "By tomorrow, I doubt if I'll even be finished with one whisker."